Hi guys, long time no see, I know. But here I am in a brand new studio, in a brand new country, and I thought it was about time I make another video. I wanted to talk about eyes today, because they're my absolute favourite thing to paint. Mainly because it means the horse is almost finished, but also because they just suddenly add so much more life to your models. I have previously done a painting tutorial on eyes specifically, but today I wanted to talk more about how to make those eyes really shine and bring out the personality, as well as making those eyes just look really alive. At the moment I'm only doing minis and tiny little horses, so I don't really have any good eyes to practice on, but I did sculpt a little thing. It's probably the biggest eye I will have ever have painted, but hopefully that means you can actually see what I'm doing. So let's do that. So as you can see, I've already prepped the eye with a base of burnt sienna and white, and now I'm starting with just a base layer of Payne's Grey just to block in the iris. And here I'm watering down my paints. You'll see me do this an awful lot throughout the video, and it would probably help me if I actually had more fluid acrylics to begin with, but I have the really thick kind, so I just work with what I've got. And because I want this eye to look really soft and the horse to have a sort of natural and calm expression, I'm going to be covering up a lot of that eye white, fleshy colour that I started with. My paint looks super streaky and horrible here, but that's okay, it always does in the first layer. I'm just trying to get a nice clean area to work with and get those edges that border the eye white really nice and crisp. In between layers I actually use my hairdryer to help dry off the paint. If you do use a hairdryer, just be aware that you don't want it on a really high heat setting with some really delicate resins or small stablemates and things, because you can melt the plastic. Once I'm happy with my overall area, I'll go over the base a few times, as long as it takes to get the area nice and dark. Then I'm going to go ahead and add some more colours, so I'm going to be adding raw umber, burnt umber, raw sienna, and a little bit of buff titanium. I start with the darkest colours, the raw umber, and even mixing in a bit more of the Payne's Grey, just to get a really nice dark brown. Basically I'm going to be trying to paint a gradient from top to bottom, with the top of the eye where the eyelid creates a shadow, and then at the bottom is where the light hits, so that's where you have your nice reflective light brownish gold colours. Once I have a nice rich dark velvety brown as a base, I'll start with some of the lighter colours, and then I rinse and repeat. I add more paint, dry, paint, dry, until I'm happy. As I said, you want your lighter, more golden browns towards the bottom of the eye where the sun will be hitting it. I personally really like my eyes quite subtle, but this is a personal preference. If you really want your eyes to pop, by all means add some more gold colours towards the bottom of the eye and really push that. Again, you'll really see me watering down my paints. Basically, eyes are really wet. They're a very wet ball. And although the gloss can help make that look wet, I try and actually add some of the shininess with the paint itself. I also can't blend acrylics to save my life, so by sort of plopping on the colours like this, I let the paint blend itself out. It does all the work for me. So again, rinse and repeat for as many layers as it takes. Here's a couple layers in and I'm quite happy with this gradient, and so now it's time for the pupil. I'm going back to my Payne's Grey. Now normally when I'm painting eyes, I have a whole head that I can use as a reference to where the horse is looking and where its head is in relation to the ground, because you want the pupil of the eye to always be level with the ground. So I'm just going to put it here. Horses' pupils are a sort of elongated oval shape generally, and this is the part where I actually push it a little bit because it can look a bit weird on a model. So I tend to make it a little bit rounder than is strictly anatomical. But this is really where, for me, personality and expression are a lot more important than super realism. Then I go back over it with some of the browns just to blend it in and make it look like it's part of the eye and not just slapped on top. And now it's time for my secret weapon. I got this bottle of ink, which is a Liquitex transparent raw umber ink, a long time ago for something completely different, but it turns out it's actually amazing for painting eyes. I only use a teeny tiny little bit and spread it very thinly over the whole eye. I basically use it as a kind of glaze, And for blue eyes, I basically do the same thing, but instead of the raw umber, I use this really light grey ink. Ink, by its very nature, tends to be a little bit more on the shiny side compared to acrylics, so already we're adding a nice satin layer to our paint job. And more recently, I've also been experimenting with this interference blue paint. Again, a teeny tiny bit of it goes a really long way. You can see how this really adds quite an intense shimmering blue effect to the eye. And I'm using this because if you look really closely at a real horse's eye, you'll often see in the pupil there's almost like a little band of blue. It's a really fun thing to play around with, and I think it can add a little bit of interest to some of the eyes. I definitely don't add it to all my eyes, and generally the more relaxed I want the horse to look, I'll probably just leave it out. So in this case I am just going to cover most of that up again. And to do that I'm actually going to be using yet another ink, this time my black ink. Now this stuff definitely isn't transparent, and I'm using this because I don't know what it is about black paint. Maybe it's the pigments, but they never seem that strong, or maybe it's just the paints I have, but I really like using this ink because it's such a rich opaque black and it gives the pupils such depth. So when I apply this ink I actually stick a little bit more closely to the anatomically correct, more elongated oval shape, and I'm careful to leave a little bit of the Payne's grey that I put down initially. Once I'm happy with my pupil, I'm going to go ahead and add another glaze of my transparent raw umber ink. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this eye is looking, so it's time for some gloss. I personally use this gloss coat by Humbrol. It's for miniature paintings like Warhammer and things, but it works really well for models as well. I've got my two glossing brushes here with me. I usually use the smaller one for eyes, but since it's a little bit of a larger surface today, I'm going to be using the bigger one. And to apply the gloss, I just kind of dab it on. You want the layer to be fairly thin so it doesn't run off, especially if you've got a horse that's standing and you leave it to dry. You may end up with a nice glossy tear down its cheek if you're not careful. That's definitely happened to me when I first started out. You can always add more layers, so start off with a thin layer and then build it up. And here we are 24 hours later. I actually did a second coat in the evening and let it dry. I usually try and leave a good 4 to 6 hours between glossing sessions. So this is 2 coats of gloss in, and I'm going to go ahead and add a third just because why not? Just whatever you do, please do not use clear nail varnish as a gloss because it will go yellow and weird after a couple of years. I'd be really curious to try resin as a gloss as well. I know it's possible and you can get art resin, but it can be a little bit expensive, which is why I've not tried it yet. I do really like this gloss though because it's never gone foggy or cloudy on me and it's never yellowed with time, which is all you really need from a gloss. And here it is, the eye all finished. This was a really fun project for me to make, and like I said, I love painting eyes, and I hope you got at least something out of this video. So I guess I'll see you in the next video in another 3 years' time. Bye bye!